You are listening to the In the Travel Know podcast, where we talk to game-changing leaders in the industry on how they got to where they are, trends they think will transform the industry, what they believe is the future of travel, and how they support sustainability, diversity, and young people in travel. Are you ready to get in the travel know? Hello, and thank you for tuning in to the In the Travel Know podcast, which is powered by Avis Budget Group and supported by the ITT Future You and Waterfront, the creative agency for ambitious travel brands. My name is Jamie Lee Abtar, your host, and today on today's episode, I'm delighted to welcome MD for G Adventures, Brian Young. Welcome to the show, Brian.
Thank you for having me.
How are you feeling today?
I won't lie, a little bit jaded after the Travel Weekly Globes Awards last night, but other than that, all good.
All good, and congratulations on your award. It was Best Adventure Company?
It was, yes, yeah. So, we were ecstatic about winning that, especially after the last 2 years for the travel industry. So it's been brilliant for my team. So they're all very pleased with themselves today, and so they should be.
Oh, fantastic. Well done to you, to the team at G Adventures. Well, the Indie Travel Know podcast is all about talking to influential leaders within the industry and getting a background on how they got started in the industry and really showcasing and highlighting your journey. Mm-hmm. So my first question to you is, how did you get into travel? What's that background? What kind of led you to this role?
So most people probably don't know, but I'm half Maltese, so my mum's from Malta. She met my dad, funnily enough, on a bus in Malta, and it was like love at first sight. He was in the RAF. So I spent a lot of, my growing up going backwards and forwards to Malta. Grew up with a set of friends in Malta. So my summer holidays were literally finish school, fly to Malta, 6 weeks in Malta and fly back. And I think really that growing up in that environment definitely gave me the bug to want to get into the travel industry, or at least work overseas in some form. And that really then stemmed to, I went on holiday with some friends to Corfu many years ago with a company called Club 1830. And whilst on that holiday, one of the reps, who actually now happens to be a very good friend of ours, said to us, have you ever thought about being a Club 1830 rep? And of course, at that point, I thought, actually, yes, because I wanted to work overseas. But bizarrely enough, actually, it never transpired because I had an interview, didn't get the job. Okay. And then I happened to be in our local nightclub one evening, and a company called Nightlife Holidays were doing a promotion. Mm-hmm. And I got talking to one of the guys that were running the promotion. They then set us up for an interview. I got the job with those guys, went down to London to do my training. I was due to fly to Ibiza. And the concept of that holiday company was youth again, like Club 1830. But they were tied into a record label because one of the owners of the company was a record producer. So their whole aspect was to fly stars out that would spend a few days with the customers, etc. etc. Anyway, with that company, we arrived in the morning and they proceeded to tell us they'd gone bankrupt at that point, which none of us believed because we thought it was just a test to see how we would cope with adverse. So we all went off for a coffee and said, that can't be true. We'll just give it an hour, we'll go back, and I'm sure they'll say, listen, that's Natch. But anyway, they did go past.
Oh, wow.
So then they put us into another company because they some of them had worked for owners abroad, or First Choice as it's known now. And they offered us a job to go to Tenerife, but it was looking after families, and that really didn't appeal at that point to me. So I wrote to Club 1830 again and said, listen, I desperately want to work in the youth marketplace overseas. My bags are packed and I'm ready to go. They then contacted me, had an interview the next day, and on the Saturday I flew to Mallorca, and that therefore was my start of my career in travel.
Wow, I like the persistence of not giving up.
No, not at all.
Going back because it's something that you wanted to do. And I think sometimes a lot of times that people get disappointed and they just give up. But you it's something that you want, you just go after it. You find another approach to it, don't you? Yeah. For those that might be listening that may not be familiar with G Adventures, tell us a little bit about G Adventures and what you guys do as a company.
Yeah, so we're a small group travel company. So most people that travel on our tours average of 12 people on it, maximum of 16. We do 750 tours on all 7 continents around the world, and they range in different styles of travel. So we have a youth demographic, which is 18 to 30 somethings, which clearly is for that age group. That's a little bit more backpacking, off the beaten track, local transportation, longer duration, going through a country, because they tend to have a little bit more time in between university or when they finish university and they're taking that year out. And then we have everything else in between all of that. Active, which is really the accent of G-Adventures. That's the adventurous really side to it. That's your climbing Mount Kilimanjaro, base camp, Everest, etc. And then we have a classic program, which really is every single age group, no matter what. And it's small group touring all over the world. We have a tie-up with National Geographic for National Geographic Journeys, which is slightly older, a little bit more comfortable accommodation, a bit more education weaved into that with the National Geographic guides. We recently just announced a tie-up with Hostel World. So they're the biggest hostel company in the world. So we launched a youth program called Romies with those guys. So that's in its infancy at the moment, but going exceptionally well. And then we also have some marine products and such like. So we have a very diverse range of product that caters. You literally could be 18-year-old or 100 and something years old. We have everything
for you,
in between. So
Oh, fantastic. Well, tell me a little bit about a day in the life. What does the day in the life of Brian look like? What's it?
Interesting. I mean, it's a very different day in life now as we're still coming through and out of, the last 2 years. But essentially, my day is kind of split up into 2 days. So my first part of the day is mostly, with the team, either one-to-ones with the senior leadership team or the team in a whole going through, trading meetings or whatever. Do a lot of the commercial side of our business with the partners that we work with in the UK. We'll be planning our strategy, how we're executing against that strategy. So that's a lot to do with, so I have a team in Europe, team in the UK and down in South Africa. So a lot of that aspect in terms of the marketing, the sales function, the day-to-day operation of how we're performing is spent in that first part of it. And then the second part of it, we're a global business and a head office that's based in Canada. So that, therefore, come lunchtime, I then tend to pivot into the global part of my role, which at that point is more, meetings around, revenue management, product, it'll be buying, operations, finance, you name it. So I spend a lot of time on video conferencing, which actually isn't a new thing for me. We have, because of the global nature of our business, we've always been heavily on Zoom anyway.
So you didn't have a huge transition?
No, not at all. No, I've been on Zoom for most of my career. So I'm not that sick to teach.
Oh, you were the one teaching everyone how to use the Zoom then.
100%. But I still then forget that I'm on mute and such like every now and again.
Oh, that's interesting. So you've obviously had a really interesting career. Are there any particular career highlights that you had, or?
It's an interest. I have had a varied career because I've worked overseas for some 16 odd years. I've come back to the UK and had a very different corporate type career. But I'd say that highlight for me was starting my own business with 3 other business partners way back when. But we built a bed bank essentially when dynamic packaging was really at its very, very infancy. We could see that, low cost carriers were really starting to increase. The tour operators had cut all of the travel agents' commission. So there was an opportunity for us to buy lots of beds all over, the mainstream destinations. And the travel agents put that, bed that we've got with a flight, create a dynamic package and off they go. So I'd always wanted to do my own business. From when I was really young. So when I was 16, I set up a business with my dad. It was called Mail Merge. So there's a big, at the time, building company called Barrett Homes. And we did all of their mail outs to all of their customer database. So my summer that year was spent literally printing thousands upon thousands of letters, folding them up, putting in an envelope and then getting them going. But after doing a summer of doing that, I realised that actually, to be honest with you, that really wasn't quite where I wanted to be. So I went back to college at that point in time, did business study. But I think the key bit for me is that I always wanted to do my own thing. I'd obviously spent a lot of time overseas on an operational function, knowing all the logistics about how you run a business from a profit and loss perspective, etc. I'd come back to the UK. I was at the time a sales director for Cosmos Holidays. So a huge risk at that point in time as well. You know, I had a great job. It was very secure. I had lots of benefits as, you know, being a director of the business. I also had a young family, and therefore, you know, any startup is a risk and a gamble. But I also knew in my heart of hearts that I had to do it. And if I didn't, you know, the business would have got set up anyway, because there was 4 of us involved in it. And I always felt that if I'd have stepped back and stayed in my comfort zone, I always had that risk of looking, you know, 2 years down the line and thinking, blimey, that business now, I could have been part and built something. So I had to go and do it. And it's, you know, for me, it's like, there's not many people, you know, would take the risk to start their own business, and not many people do it because it's such, you know, risk, and that, you know, it's not always successful starting your own business. So it does take a lot, I think, you know, self-belief and, should I dare say it, but big balls as well to make the decision to do it. So yeah, for me, that was like definitely a career highlight to do that.
I love that. I actually didn't know this part, that you had your entrepreneurial side of your business, and I like that a lot. It definitely shows like the diversity of your kind of background and your experience for those that might be listening that might not necessarily want to kind of go into a career straight away, but they can, you know, entrepreneurship might be the thing that you're interested in, and that's something that you can like look at and do, and you've done that successfully. Can I ask how the business is, or have you sold it? Or you know, tell me you're going to sold it for a couple million pounds?
No, unfortunately not. I'd love to be sat here. Might not even be sat here at that point if that was the case. But no, we built that business massively successful, but unfortunately we got caught up in the whole Tom's HMRC thing and had to put the business under. But it happens.
It's the risk though. I like the fact that you took the risk and to go for it. What would you say are kind of those biggest factors for your success, or that's made you successful?
So I like to think I'm a fairly good people manager. Okay. I'd hope my team would think the same of me. But
comment under the podcast.
Yes, yeah, exactly. And I'll be speaking to them later. But no, I think that is really important facet for me. I learned at a very, very young age that how you manage people and treat people is so important in terms of being able to make a successful team. I'll give you an example of this. I used to be in the part-time army, territorial army in the UK, and you join at 17 years old. That's the youngest you can join. And I joined literally as I was 17, and I loved it. And after 6 months, I asked if I could go on a course for promotion. And they said, absolutely no chance. You're 17. You know, most people that get promoted are at least 20 something years old. And you've been here 5 minutes as well. So they were like adamant. And this where that tenacity comes back in. At the time, I was working for my parents. I had a pub and a restaurant. So I had the time, you know, they were fine with me to take the time out. So I literally kept pestering and saying, you know, I would like to do it because I think it would further my experience, my understanding, knowledge, etc. And I have nothing to lose. You obviously have an investment, you know, by me going there. And, you know, the thing that was interesting is the commanding officer of our battalion obviously had got wind that there was this pain in the arse young man that was consistently saying, no, I want to do it. So he actually called us into his office and said, you know, I've heard that you just won't take no for an answer. I said, well, that is true. And he, you know, he asked me why I wanted to do it. So I explained. And he said to us, you do realise that, you know, we could do this, put you on this course, but you will fail the course. And I said, well, that's fine. I'm happy with failure. I think you learn more through failure than you do through success.
I literally just said in the last podcast, success is a horrible teacher.
Yes, yeah. So in the end, God bless this commanding officer. He took a leap of faith and said, look, you can go. So I went, and there were 30 of us on this course. It's a non-commissioned officers course. I was clearly the youngest there, and I came third, which was automatic promotion in the pass-out parade. So I also therefore become one of the youngest people ever to get promoted in the TA. And the irony of that is actually, whilst that was great, I was way too young to be promoted. So what then subsequently happened, I ended up in charge of, you know, 25, 30 odd year old men with no management, you know, behind me, telling them what to do in a fashion that was wrong. And I learnt the hard way. So one evening we were away on an exercise we came back into the camp and they all crowded round the bed and basically beat us like to a pulp to some degree.
Oh my goodness.
You know, and that lesson at that point that they were making, those guys, was you might have, you know, a title, but actually that doesn't give you the privilege to act in the manner in which you do. And even though it hurt, because obviously, you know, it's not, you know, at 17 to get a beating and also realise very quickly, you know, your actions and the consequence of them. And I think that really, really stood me in good stead for the rest of my career. Because, you know, a lot of what I do is, you know, I see myself as a servant to the team that are around me. So we're only as good as the people that are there. So therefore, I think people management is one of the key things.
One of the key things. Ah, brilliant. And success is obviously defined slightly different. Everybody's version or idea of success is different. How do you define success?
I would say for me, success is about happiness. So some people will look at success and say, right, it's about the title that I aspire to get to, whether it's a managing director, head of whatever, you know, or some people see success as money. How much money am I earning? That's, you know, a success in some respect. But I honestly, hand on heart, think that true success is if you can get out of bed and you love what you do on a daily basis and you're fulfilled and you feel you're happy and passionate about what you do, that for me is success. Because I don't think many people actually find it. So when you do, you know, I think it's a real golden thing. And there is the saying, isn't there, that, you know, if you love what you do, you won't work another day for the rest of your life type thing. And I think the travel industry is full of people like that because, you know, I've been in the industry a long, long time. And the passion that people have for travel and the people, and you see it, you know, like last night there was 1,200 people at an event. Everyone's very passionate about, you know, travel, really, you know, and we've been through hell over the last 2 years, but we're still here. And we're here because of the people that are in the industry. So, so that, I think, is, for me, happiness is really important.
Hi there, this is Sam Ballard, the Managing Director of Waterfront, the ambitious creative company for ambitious travel companies. This episode's Waterfront Moment is all about brand and culture. G Adventures has an incredible brand identity. Its very DNA has been created by its founder, Bruce Poon-Tip, who many of you will know is a fearless entrepreneur. His books are incredible. They're well worth reading. It's a similar way to how a founder like Richard Branson is bound up with their company, Virgin. It's a similar kind of thing. And G Adventures is renowned for the work it does through its non-profit, Planetera, where it identifies an issue for a traveller and an issue for local community, and it creates a bridge that benefits both parties. The whole thing is about creating a more sustainable travel industry, and there are other companies that do this as well, but that's one of the most amazing things about G Adventures. However, for this Waterfront Moment, I actually want to talk about something slightly different, and it could seem far less important, but not for marketing. So something that you might not appreciate or realise when you think of G Adventures, what's one of the first things you think of? It's that colour. It's that purple colour. Like Virgin's red, the G purple is everywhere. It's on its website, its logo, its socials, even its offices are covered in it. A brand should be like a stick of rock. So if you cut it anywhere, you should know what you're dealing with. It shouldn't be, whether it's socials, email, it should always be clear what you're dealing with. And it's obvious what G is. G Adventures, it has one of the best examples in the travel industry of developing that brand culture. This is your Waterfront Moment, brought to you by Waterfront, the creative agency for the travel industry.
Well, the podcast, we look at 3 different pillars. So we talked a little bit about you, got a bit of a background on yourself, and now we want to talk about insights. Now, you mentioned briefly the last 2 years, how hard and difficult it's been for the travel industry. Not going to say the word and why, but how has those last 2 years helped to really revolutionize or change the way how you do business and G Adventures? Really?
I think one of the things that you realise is you have to act quickly, and unfortunately, as part of that, as you're going through what we've been through the last 2 years, you know, you have to strip back the workforce, which is a real unfortunate side of it, and that's been very hard to do because we built a great team. But then what you realise suddenly is you are left with this, you know, smaller workforce, but the amount of output that we've managed to do in that 2 years has been absolutely phenomenal. So we've realised that actually we have to streamline all the processes, stop pontificating about certain things, make decisions and execute quickly upon them. And with a small team, I think as made it easier in which to do.
that.
So I think we surprised ourselves with the amount of work that we've managed to cover, the amount of things that we brought to the market. We're such a small team versus where we've been. I think the other thing as well is that, we were very lucky as a business. We had a call center, global call center. It's all online, always has been. So that immediacy of shut down, everyone get online was a really easy transition for us, because we had people working from home in our call center anyway. But what it has brought, I think, part of that change is, we had a big sales team. There was about 11 of them in the past. There was only like 3 of them at the moment. And Zoom or video conferencing per se, in the past, I'd have like those 11 reps would be in their cars traveling from one travel agent to the other, driving from one town. But, the maximum amount of people they could have seen in a day, just because of travel, maybe 8 if you're lucky, if it's meaningful conversation. Whereas suddenly Zoom changes the whole remit of that. Suddenly, travel counsellors is a great example. They've got like 500 odd home workers. Now, for us to train them, in the old days was really hard, take a long period of time. Now, all of a sudden, we can work with travel counsellors, we can get a webinar into play. And before I know it, the team within the space of 40 minutes have trained on a subject matter to 300 travel counsellors, which would have taken us forever and a day to get that amount of knowledge across to that amount of people. So that's a massive benefit. And I actually think that's the way forward to a certain degree, because you think, a lot of the time, sales reps have to make appointments. They try and get into the store before the store opens, but you still only can impact on 3 or 4 people. Whereas now I could say to Hayes, as an example, we've got like, truckload of stores. We can run this session of training. It can be at that time, but everybody can come in. So that I think is massively streamlined our business, made us much more efficient. The cost, benefit to us and our partners as well is, because as people build back and come out of this, they're going to be busy. So the last thing they really need is like lots and lots of sales reps in and out constantly. Whereas this sort of creates a vacuum in which to do that. And agents, I think what we've learned through the pandemic is, I've been in this industry for such a long time. I sound like a really old person, but, I've heard the demise of travel agents, as the internet started to grow. Travel agents are facing, a death by 1,000 cuts. I heard it so many times. It's just not true, because people, yes, don't get me wrong, online has grown, but simplistic transaction, I think, is very easy to do online. But actually, once you get into some complexity, you need somebody there. And, our owner of the business was talking recently, and he said, when things go wrong, you need an advocate to help you in which to get things sorted out. And a travel agent really is that conduit for me. And the more complex it is, I don't, personally, I don't have time to sit on the internet for hours on end trying to work it's just too much. I can't be bothered. So therefore, I need to go to an expert, whether that's a home worker, a travel agent, and just say, what? There it is. This is just what I want. Can you just come back and tell me?
Send me the email, the costings.
100%. And their expertise is vital. So I think agents, as much as everyone keeps telling me constantly, they're die and breed, they really are not. And actually, I think people have come to really appreciate what a travel agent brings through the last 2 years. And they've been through hell, but they're a resilient bunch. They're very good at what they do. And I think the customers started to realize moving forward, we need an advocate, and it has to be that conduit between, what I'm the customer, this is where I'm going with whoever, and someone to, help work it through. Yeah,
I think you're right. You're spot on there. That's one thing that the last 2 years has done, is really helped to show the value of the travel agent, and why they're so important. And I can only see it getting, they're not dying breed. I think they're back. If anything, they're back.
Absolutely. I think their worth has been proven more
definitely
so,
been proven. What trends is Brian watching right now that you think are gonna transform the industry, but be technological, marketing, adventure, even in the adventure space? What's happening?
Trends. It's an interesting one. I think 2 things are going to happening. So I've been saying this for a while, and people will say, you're always going to say that, Brian, because you work for an experience-based company. But the reality of the situation, I think, is people will always want to go for a break, like a beach, sit on a beach in the sunshine and do absolutely nothing for a period of time. But as human beings, I think we get more inquisitive, want to do more, get bored quickly, because all these distractions have led to less like concentration. So I think people will balance getting away and taking a switch off, which is like a beach holiday for me, versus actually I want to go to a destination and I really want to meet the people, the culture, the food, get under the skin and explore. And I think that's growing. It's been growing massively pre-pandemic, and it will continue to do that. So that's one bit. And then I think the other thing is about conscious travelers. Everyone talks about sustainability, and I know we're probably going to talk a bit about that, but I do think travelers at the moment, I think you've got two things that are happening. Everyone knows they've got to become more sustainably driven, and it's a big, pressure on everybody. But the problem though is when you talk to the customers, it's not top of their, they're not buying on that basis. They say it's important to them, but it's not the be all and end all. So what I think though is going to happen is people will become conscious travelers, and therefore will want to know that when I go away on holiday, I want to be clear that I'm doing good. Now, whether that's the offsetting of the carbon emissions of the flight, or whether it's community-based tourism, which we're obviously massively into at G Adventures, those things are going to be important. And I'm lucky that I work for a company, I think, that's at the very front edge of all of that, because, we have a thing called a ripple score, where, it's about how much money is left in the local community when people travel with G Adventures, because we've always said that's one of our main aims, and we get people to say, it's easy to say, but how do you prove it? So therefore the ripple score is that's a massive piece of work that we undertook 3 years ago. But everybody, if you're online or on your brochure, can see every tour that we operate has a ripple score. And therefore the higher the score, the more money is staying in local communities. So that's where I come from as a conscious traveller. Those are the sort of tools that I think are going to be expected of companies, is to say, look, I want to do this because my priority is I want to go to this destination, have a great time. But whilst I'm doing that, I want to know that in the background, consciously, you are doing looking after the planet, looking after people, education, whatever those things, pillars are. That's what I think. And therefore, I think it's an education process that we have to get to it as companies in travel, and we have to bring the customer along with us. And therefore, and at some point, the two things are going to flip. The customer then will actually become the conduit that's saying, I won't travel unless you've got these things. But at the minute, we're still on that education
We're still on the educational bit. I think we'll be there for a little while. Our audience is typically young people coming into the industry, people who are already in the industry, might be looking to switch over into a different role. What skills do you think are really key right now for anyone looking to come into the travel industry? Any particular skills you think?
I think anyone younger person looking to come into the travel industry, I think you have to have a can-do, will-do attitude. Our industry changes constantly through evolution or impact, like COVID as an example. And then suddenly you're pivoting your business on its head, and you might be a marketing specialist, but actually you end up doing operations, sales and everything. But you can't do that if you don't have the right attitude in the first place. So I always think a key skill set that young people, or anybody as it happens, has to have a can-do, will-do attitude. And the other things is, they need to have the ability to roll their sleeves up. If they want to survive. Hard work ethic is really, really important. I know everyone says, you've got to work hard, but my whole thing is, you get out what you put in.
100%.
No one owes you a living and no one's going to give you anything, just hand it to you on a plate. So that entitled attitude that we see, unfortunately, it just won't wash, because unfortunately, if have got that entitled attitude and versus a can-do, will-do attitude, you're forever going to be unfulfilled in what you do, and you'll view the world through that lens, unfortunately. So if there's one piece of advice, it would be that from me.
Oh, that's brilliant. It's funny that looking back at the different guests we've had on the podcast so far, that for that same question, no one is actually given a actual skill, like a physical skill, like that usually like an academic skill. The skills have definitely been more around personality, traits and things that usually. So do you think that's because of the type of industry that we are in, because we're in travel, so we interact with people, so we need to have those like personable skills versus academic skills, so you can train on the job, you can teach them the different elements of the operation. So you think
I think so. No, there are certain industries that you know, rightly or wrongly, they employ because you've been to a university and you've got a certain, you know, and that's what they look for. Whereas travel isn't like that. Actually, you can come from any background, any walk of life, I think, in travel for that exact reason. It is an industry that allows people to be themselves and that freedom of, you know, this is who I am. You can pick the skill sets up as you go. And because it is a very personality, not personality as such, but people industry. I think you're right.
Okay. So you mentioned sustainability, and you did mention the ripple effect that you guys have in destination. Talk to me a little bit more specifically about maybe some of the programs that you got, what you guys are doing as it relates to sustainability, supporting locals within different destinations that you go to. Talk to us a little bit about that, and from an environmental standpoint as well.
So we have a foundation called Planetera that G Adventures works with. Bruce set up the foundation, clearly still, you know, part of his stable of businesses, but we set out a few years back to when I started. I've been with G Adventures 7 years now. And at the start of when I started, we had a main aim to get to 50 community tourism projects around the world within 5 years. And we achieved that within 3, if I remember rightly. So then we said, okay, we've achieved that so quickly. Could we get to 100? So that was our biggest aim, to get to 100. And, you know, in lockdown, we got to 100 projects around the world. Even with a lockdown, we still managed to work with communities around the world in which to create, you know, projects. And I think the beauty for me is this is how we give back to communities. It's how we educate our travelers around the importance of community tourism and the power of what it can do to local communities. And, you know, for me, I actually just want people to go away and have an amazing holiday. And then whilst on holiday, realize actually, gosh, this is a pretty amazing like project that we're visiting. So they're experience based, they're part of the tour, and therefore I think people enjoy them because it's an experience, but then they start to educate whilst at the project. So they're really important, and we have lots of different types of community tourism projects. If you talk about environment, you know, we have community tourism projects that tackle environmental challenges. So as an example, the Whitsunday Islands, we've got a reef protection and regeneration program that's part of a community tourism project. So that's an important facet. Or we'll set up a community tourism project for the local community that stops maybe poaching or deforestation. So they've got another business that's fueled by our passengers traveling. Therefore, they don't need to do those things, if you see what I mean. We try and work with them so that we challenge like an issue, but bring a solution.
At the same time. Which I think is brilliant.
That's really, you know, it's a real big at the heart of what we do.
And it shows that you're working hand in hand with the actual communities or the destinations that you go to, that you have your experiences in. 100%. I think that's really important. Like part of the a very important piece of sustainability is working with those local communities and local people. And how about diversity and inclusivity? What are some of the initiatives or things that you guys might be looking to do, planning to do? Is it on the agenda?
Oh, no, it's very, very much on our agenda, as you can imagine. And we're a very diverse company, you know, just because, in one respect, because of the globality of, you know, the business and the, you know, different cultures of people that work within it. But we have a lot to learn at the same time still, you know. So, you know, one of the things is we started the base of it with a company called Diversio, and everybody filled out, you know, a survey, and that was really for us to understand what are the baseline goals that we need to look at as a business for improvement moving forward. So that really is for us to establish, like, where are we? Where do our people think we are? So that was the first part to that, and then subsequently off of the back of that, there are a number of things that are happening. So our business, everybody that works for the company is going through unconscious bias training as part of that. Culture is a big part of our business. It's what I think drives the connection of all of our people around the world. But we used to like have interviews and then we'd have a culture fit. So they would come in, there'd be people within our team. And actually, we've looked at that and said, that's not right moving forward when we think about diversity and inclusion. So there's a lot of work to flip that completely to, is it a culture add?
Okay.
And add, to our culture rather than do you fit into it?
Do you fit into the culture?
Exactly.
Culture add. Oh, interesting.
So that's, and then we have a DEI committee that's set up to tackle all the challenges that we're going to have to face as a company. So as a, an example of that, when I think about our brochures, do they represent all of the customers that travel with us truly, the imagery? The reality of that situation is probably, we're nowhere near where we need to be. So there's a lot of work, just simple things
it's
like that. It's like looking at that and saying, that's not right. It's not representative. And then even the names of some of the tours, so, and then, interview process, where we interview, it's very easy in the travel industry to recruit within the travel industry, but then you just get what you've got, and that's not to say there's not great people in it, but it's not diverse enough. We know that anyway, so actually if you fish within the same, you're not going to change this situation. So we have to look at that and say, we need to cast differently when we're looking for people. We have to think differently about where do we place those adverts? What do the adverts, even for those jobs, how do they come across? Are they in that respect, are they actually going to give us a diverse amount of people apply for the job in the first place? So huge amount of work in that aspect in terms of what we do. And then the other aspect is, we do a lot of talks as a business. Bruce, very public facing. We have over the whole of the, lockdown period, we make sure that, if we're bringing experts in to talk about a subject matter, it has to be a diverse panel, and therefore gives everybody opportunity.
Oh, fantastic. That's amazing to hear all the different steps that you guys are taking. I always say small steps, big impact. Diversity and inclusivity, or even sustainability, is never going to be
guys, it's an ongoing process, constantly.
Ongoing process is work that you have to put in. But it's important to know that these conversations are actually on the agenda.
No, for sure.
And it's really exciting to hear these things. As we get ready to wrap up, my two favorite questions to ask everyone is, the first one is, if you weren't Brian Young, MD of Gia Ventures, what kind of role or what job would you like to explore?
Do you know, it's funny, that question, if you think, over my career, that's probably changed. When I was a kid, it was probably be an astronaut or a pilot or something. But in all honesty, if I think about where I am right now, if I wasn't doing what I'm doing now, I'm fanatical about cooking, but outside.
Cooking outside,
and barbecues and such like. And I'm also into being outside a lot, and that whole creating community outside in your garden with friends and family and such like. So I think there would be a part of me that would look to do, set a business up maybe that, is all about how you look at the space that you've got around you, and how can you transform it to take outdoor, indoors,
outdoor living.
Got you. So I'm quite passionate about that. I'm happy when I've got a set of tongs in my hand, fire going, and a beer and such like. So that's probably most people thinking, God, blimey, that's a bit left field. We wouldn't expect that of Brian. We think he's going to set up some kind of charitable, but that's what would, that's a passion for me. I've always said I'd write a cooking book based on barbecue and such likes. But that's
really interesting.
That one,
bit different. I like that one, bit different. We've had lots of different ones, trust me. And whose career inspires you and why?
So this question I have pondered for a while, and this is going to sound really bad in some respect, but I don't think there's any individual that has in. And when I think about this question, I think, is there an individual that has inspired me so much that actually the way in which they act and behave, or the values that they hold, have I taken them and put them into my everyday life? There is no one individual. So I like to read biographies, autobiographies, different people in different walks of life, whether it's Richard Branson or Sir Alex Ferguson or whoever. because that fascinates me in terms of what makes those individuals tick. Why have they been successful? And can I learn something off of those individuals? So my inspiration is very diverse. So, there's Ant Middleton. Whilst I think, he says some things that are wrong, I've been to see him on stage, and, some of what he says, you can really resonate if you strip who it is away and listen to the message. So that's the sort of thing for me, is I actually like to think of, learn from different people. Different industries that they're in, and therefore there isn't any one, unfortunately. But that's fine, the why,
because I think I'm very much like that as well. I like to look at different people's stories and outside of the industry, every different industry, and you learn so much from individual stories that you can pull into your own life. But thank you so much for joining us on the Indie Travel No show. I'm wishing you much success, and I hope that 2022 brings G Adventures nothing but,
marvelous. Yes, that'd be great. Thank you very much.
And no COVID.
God, no.
Thank you. The Indie Travel No podcast is powered by Avis Budget Group, a global mobility provider operating in over 160 countries, creating a diverse and inclusive culture. Their brands include Avis, Budget, and Zipcar. They work to connect you to more. They are a team of visionaries, inventors, and achievers, driving technology that will revolutionize the world. They have roles in airports, operations, corporate, and support teams. To find out more, visit avisbudgetgroup.jobs to browse their latest global vacancies.